And I am pleased to welcome Harry Sams today to be with us. And Harriet, um, Harriet's title of the talk is "Following the Call of the Land, Get Out of the Bath and Go Up the Fell. I Need You There," which is rather intriguing. But let me first introduce Harriet to you. She researches, teaches, and mentors and facilitates ecotherapy and archaeotherapy. She is a published writer on such interconnected threads as myth, archaeology, earth-based spirituality, environmental art, animism, and climate ecological chaos. Harriet works for the Toriki Trust UK, a Buddhist ecotherapy charity. She also co-hosts Earth Exchange Cafes on behalf of Radical Joy for Hard Times, a USA-based eco-resiliency, eco-art, and landscape belonging charity, and co-facilitates Through the Door imaginal workshops for the Climate Psychology Alliance. Harriet is currently undertaking research for her PhD in archaeotherapy at Bournemouth University. So, given the title of the talk, I'll just hand over to you. And I mean, it's kind of intriguing, and also all the archaeotherapy part, I think it will be interesting for people to hear about.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everybody for inviting me. I am Harriet Sams, and yes, all of that is true. That's my job. I am a mentor, guide, and teacher in all things ecological and archaeological, with a mind towards the therapeutic and connective benefits of humans and nature and heritage all merging together. So my approach is really more about, it's not really about mental health provision, although there is an aspect of that to my work. My work is really focused on connection to the wider landscape and the re-emergence of the human into the belonging of the enmeshment of everything. So today I'm going to tell you it really happened to me, a story about what it feels like to be called by a voice of the land. And I'll tell you all about the story and maybe some of the things that I've sort of learned about it along the way. Also, I was listening to John's talk and just feeling so much gratitude and actually a real sense of empowerment, because I think when you hear my story, my tale, there's an aspect of being very alone and feeling like it's just me against this huge or unthinking, this sort of bland mechanism that wants to do what it wants to do without any kind of thought for the land. And then my connection to that land being such a different quality to what I'm up against and being on my own. So perhaps you can hear a little bit about that. And I'm actually thinking to myself, I should be more brave at networking. Actually, I need to trust myself a little bit more. So maybe I'm learning that as I'm hearing this. So I have got, sorry, I'm not meant to be looking at the chat.
No, I'm just saying you are made co-host, so if you have any screen share, you can do that. Okay.
Yeah, no, and it's just wonderful to see little things popping up and just going, there's a resonance. And I think that actually what I'm really so glad about with coming to today is what I think I'm really beginning to understand deeply, like really in my heart, in my bones, in every time that I teach or every time that I hold a workshop space or build community space, is that when we enmesh and we network, magic happens. It really does. And I'm really holding that and really, really supporting that we can believe that and act with that energy. So I'm going to share my screen, if that's all okay. I live in Cumbria. I grew up in Cumbria. I was very lucky to grow up on a relatively small farm. So I had landscape available to walk. I made the river, that the sort of, we had not very many acres, but I knew the river intimately. I knew the nettle patch. I knew the wall. I knew the scree, and so I was just wild. I was a wild child, and so I I feel that I had earth just seeped into me, and the voice of the earth and all of the non-human beings of that earth were just always part of my way of being connected. And then as I grew up, I got older, and the forces of the world sort of dulled that a little bit. But I was always quite sure that I that my landscape was talking to me. It was always talking to me, and I wasn't particularly alone. I didn't really feel unique in it, but I just knew that I had that sort of rural upbringing where most of my life I was around non-humans. I wasn't particularly interested in being in the home, and the sort of family dynamics. I just wanted to be out all the time. We had sheep, we had chickens, we had goats, we had cows, but equally I just wanted to be wild with the trees and the river. And then, as in my circuitous route of life, I finally came back to Cumbria to have my own children, and it was like it was coming home. It felt like the land was waiting for me to come home, and that I really was an enmeshed part of that land. I was that was where I belonged, and that I had an active relationship with the voices of the beings. So I knew the robin, or I knew the paths of the deer. So I would know the deer. I knew the new fawns that were born. I knew, and so I was part of that kind of biodiversity. And when I then sort of grew up, and through school, you're told you have to sort of make a line for what kind of career you want. And I just knew I needed to be connected to the earth. And I thought a little bit about civil engineering, actually, which is quite interesting, listening to John's talk. And I think, oh my God, what if I'd been, turned like an elf, turned to an orc accidentally, that my love of the earth had turned me into a civil engineer. But anyway, I stuck with archaeology, and I actually focused on prehistoric archaeology. So my training and my career, I studied at Glasgow University, but I worked for 3 years in Ireland, ironically working on their road system, their road development from Belfast down to Dublin. So that was my patch, and so there was a lot of archaeology that sort of rewrote the narrative of prehistoric Ireland, and I was very aware of this kind of dichotomy of being immersed in the land, but on a commercial level, where the only way that I could be connected to these sites was because of the commercialism and the fact that the land was being terraformed with these huge energies and these energetics of development, and all of the motor car and all of this. And so I was finding myself getting torn apart. Literally, I felt torn apart. And although my thinking wasn't quite developed at that point, I could very much viscerally feel that commercial archaeology was really challenging because of this very strong pull. I was immersed in these sites, but equally it would be destroyed. There was a destructive aspect to this, and it's called rescue archaeology. But actually witnessing that, and in the archaeological profession, there's very little space for understanding that kind of process and how it feels to be an archaeologist. So there was something in me. I actually ended up leaving commercial archaeology because, this is another bit of a story, I was digging a Bronze Age burial ground. So there was quite a few burials, and the land had been completely stripped. It was near just about 20 miles north of Dublin, and the land had been completely stripped of all grasses, biodiversity, any kind of farming sort of identity at all, so that you just had this naked soil, naked sort of soil. The natural is what it's called. And I was excavating, and there was not a single bit of naturalness really there, apart from this kind of alluvial deposit from the subsoil. And I was just thinking, I just don't feel like I can do this anymore. I feel so bereft of life here. This is not what this is not the connectiveness. This is not how my soul path should be going. It's very reductive, it's very clinical, it's very scientific, all of the things that help it be a robust profession. And then I sort of sat back on my haunches and I looked to the right, and there was a hare about 10 meters away from me, and up on his hind legs like this, just looking at me. And I was like, wow, okay, I'm just having this kind of almost like, existential moment of like, what am I doing with my life? And there's a hare just sort of sat there, and it's like, barren land, isn't it? You couldn't have just popped out from a hedge or anything. It was nothing. And we just looked at each other for a good 20 seconds. And in those 20 seconds, my world just shifted, and then it just lolloped away. And I was like, right, that's it. So I think about a month later, I handed my notice in, and off I went. And so this is the sort of the way that I think, with all the best will in the world, being deeply connected to the earth and trying to make a career out of it, there's this voice, this intuition, this voice that keeps saying, no, you are more than that. You are more than just, a paid person with this skill. So I went off and I sort of found out what that felt like. And coming home to Cumbria actually was a really important part of that. And I started teaching the prehistoric archaeology of Cumbria. So one of the things I had to do at the local secondary school, because they had an adult education part of the school, and I first off started teaching Italian, because my degree was joint Italian and archaeology. But then I just said to them, oh, I'd love to do a prehistoric archaeology course. Is it okay if I put one together? And they said, yes, let's do that. So off I went for a summer, going around all of these sites in Cumbria. And if anybody knows anything about Cumbria is also a World Heritage Site, because it's got the Lake District National Park inside it. So lots of mountains and lakes, and it's really very beautiful. And it's been designated as a World Heritage Site. But among the obvious beautiful natural imposing, incredible geological landscape, there are lots of sacred sites, there are burial mounds, there are avenues of stones, there's stone circles that are very, very ancient, that actually contemporaneous, which means of this related similar time to the Orkney stone circles that have now been established as being the oldest in the British Isles. And there's lots and lots of other ones that are just out of the way. So I spent this amazing summer just mooching and going to, because there's a lot of open access land as well in Cumbria. So a lot of it is just there, but you just need to know how to find it and where to find it. So I just spent this wonderful time putting together a syllabus, taking people through prehistory and into history, and stopping at the Romans. I'm not particularly interested in the Romans. So got to the Romans. So it was just this wonderful experience of being given permission to learn more about my landscape. And one of them was this site. This is a photograph of exactly where the site is. So you can't see it. I'm looking away across a valley called the Eden Valley, and the River Eden, Ituna was what the Romans called it, is one of the only rivers in England, not Britain, but England, that flows south to north, and it meets the Solway Firth, and it makes this very fertile valley on the eastern edge of the Lake District Massif, which is where the volcanic sort of geology is. But the site that I went to was is in the Pennines, and the Pennines, if anybody knows the UK very well, is the sort of stretch in the middle, like the backbone. It's called the backbone, like the spine of hills that start in Cheshire, which is sort of midway down and ends right on the border of where the River Tyne goes over to Newcastle. And then there's a flat plain, and then it becomes the Cheviots in Scotland. So the site that I'm at is at the very, very northern tip of the Pennines. And you can look across the Eden Valley, looking westward, and you can see the massif of the Lake District fells. And if for any reason, they are often obscured by cloud, by mist. On a clear day, they are like razor sharp against the land, against the sky. They are, in the wintertime, the valley can be green, the fells are white. So sitting at the Pennines, if anyone is a poet or an artist, it feels like when you're in the Lake District, you're sort of really living, and it's elemental, and it's, the height is where the gods live, or, it's just dramatic. Water rushes through. There's lots of landslides. And then there's this Eden Valley, which is lovely and fertile. And then there's the Pennines, which is where you would sit and observe this sort of majesty and magic occurring, with this kind of backdrop of where the gods must live, and occasionally it just disappears. And so I was up on this site and I was exploring this upland. It's not a particularly high range of fells up here, but it's certainly not the valley. We're talking about maybe 700 meters of elevation, so about 1,100-1,200 feet, so not insignificant but not huge. So this particular fell, call it a fell, which is like Nordic for hill, is definitely got some occupation levels from prehistory. There's one particular site called Cardarnath Pike, which is a multi-phased Bronze Age burial mound with little sort of satellite burials around it. So that's sort of about, I don't know, a mile away on the top, on the ridge. But where I was particularly, I was very interested because when you're down in the valley, you can see what looks like some sort of enclosure made of stones. So I went up there, and if you can see in this picture, you can see these stones, which would be something like a kind of containing wall. Imagine if you've got an enclosure that you've built a wall around, which of course it's all ruined now. So I was just sitting up there and getting to know this place. And then I went to look at the very lovely named transactions. Oh, that's me, by the way, in Stonehenge on my 40th birthday, having a little nap because I was really not very well. And the healing energy of being in the stones, by the way, was just incredible. So I just wanted to put that in there. So I started doing a bit of desk-based research. And this wonderful publication, which has been going on since about 1870 or something, and it only stopped being published in 2022, called The Transactions of the Cumberland and Westmoreland Antiquarian and Archaeological Society. And this, I wanted to research what this place was. And all I could find initially was this OS 6469 tumuli, Giant's Grave, Hespeck Raise. And when you look on an OS map, it's called Hespeck Raise. And a raise is, just like maybe a little craggy promontory. So I delved a little bit deeper and tried to find out what these numbers meant. And I came across a transaction, somebody had written in 1864, and the language is very flowery, but it describes what's up there. So I shall read it to you. On Castle Carrick Fell, which is the fell that I was on, there are two great cairns. Well, the one that I explained is Cardarnath. Wonderful accumulations of stones that must have cost immense labour to pile up, because few stones can be obtained in these elevated sites. In other words, it takes a lot of effort to put stones up so high. They resemble the mighty burial heaps of ancient chieftains in the Cheviot range, such as the Hare or Army, Cairn in Redesdale, and Cairn Glassenhope in North Tynedale. These cairns on Castle Carrick Fell are not far distant from one another. One is called Hespeck Raise, reminding us of the Dunmail Raise. If anybody knows the history, Dunmail was the king of Reged on Ullswater and the resting place of the last British king of Cumberland. 3 lines down. It is an enormous mass of earth and stones, like a titanic long barrow, so vast that with the advantage of its lofty position, 1,397 feet above the sea, it breaks the skyline of the lofty fell to a spectacular looking from the north in such a way as to deserve its local name of the Giant's Grave. The other cairn is towards the western face of the mountain, which is the one that I described, Cardunath Pike, as you can see, being near to the ancient British village or second group of circular pit dwellings already noted. As the object of choosing such elevated sites for burial places was to ensure that the departed chief or prince could not in death be forgotten by his people, we cannot conceive any position more effective for such a purpose. So in other words, whoever's buried in there, and whoever wrote this assumed it was a man, so let's get over that just for a moment. But, whoever's put in there is because it's really obvious from a very, very far distant vision. So if you're in the Eden Valley, you can see this from far away. So it was deliberately chosen to be there so that everybody could see this important person's burial site. Great indeed must have been the importance of the mighty dead, for whom these sepulchres on the mountain's brow were reared. So elegant. They never write transactions and reports like this anymore. As when living they had in honour, so they were set forth on their long journey to the unseen land of Anun, the Celtic paradise of the West. It may be with a nation's tribute of reverence and love. So, here is a map that accompanies this report, and again, it's sort of difficult to see, but can you see my cursor? Yeah. So where we're talking about is this Castle Carrick Fell, and that's the pit dwelling, and that is Hespeck Raise there. So all of this is pretty flat. And here's the River Irthing. Here's the River Gelt, which is, of course, in Nordic, which means the Golden River, which comes up here. And then they basically meet the River Eden just here, where Little Corby is. So we're looking here. And this is a shieling, which is basically an old shepherd's hut that looks up onto the fell. So that's the top, that's the beginning of the fell. And can you just in the distance see the Lake District fells? So all of it from here to there is the Eden Valley, which is where I grew up. And here, this is from a little fell called Torkin Fell, which is right next to it. Can you see where the sun is? Here, there's just this tiny little blip on the horizon. That's Hespeck Raise. So I had done this research and I had concluded that this place was obviously important, either at least from telling the tale that it was a giant's grave. And I'll just stop share so you don't sort of read. But worth putting in because it's either a Bronze Age burial mound that has got at least some evidence that it's in a transaction. It's got a legendary name. It has been joined in some way to this known Bronze Age burial site, which is just about a mile away. And so I put it in and really didn't think much else of it. Then I was then, I don't know, it was springtime. So I think it was probably about a month later after I'd done this research. Oh, no, that was the summertime. So it was about 8 months later, but a month after I'd run the course, because that was in the winter. I was having some sort of personal issues with the father of my children, and we were sharing custody to a certain extent of the children. And so I had a rare day where I was on my own, but I didn't have a car because he would take the girls out with the car. So only had a push bike, and I had time on my hands. So I decided to run a bath, as you do, and I was just enjoying the peaceful quiet of just being on my own. And it was a lovely day, but I didn't really want to do anything with it. I just wanted to sort of chill out. And I was very relaxed, enjoying my bath. And this voice suddenly said, "Get out of the bath, go up the fell, I need you there." And it wasn't just a sort of random thought. It was a voice. It was really clear. It was like, do this, go and do this. And I actually at that point said, I'm not doing that, thanks. I want to stay in the bath, and it's my day off and I haven't got a car, go away. Get out of the bath. You need to get up the fell. I need you up there. So I did. I got out of the bath. I was like, right, I really hope I'm not making this up, because I really just want to sit and watch a film maybe and just chill out. So I got on my push bike and I cycled, not far, but 4 or 5 miles, got to the foot of the fell and I started walking up, and I was thinking, oh, this is at least a nice day. I'm glad that it's the wrong way around. I like to go for a walk or go for a bike ride and then get a wash. So I was thinking this is totally not, the right way around. So anyway, and I got up to this place and I knew exactly where I had to go, by the way. There was no question. I knew exactly where it needed me to go. And I sat on that sort of rocky bit where the ruin wall is. And I was just looking out across the fells, and it was just lovely. And it was just the blue sky, very rare in Cumbria. If anybody knows England, early spring days are not usually that lovely. And it was just really lovely being up there, and it was still and it was quiet. And then I heard behind me, like a spray can, when somebody's doing graffiti, spraying graffiti. And so I looked behind me, in the very center of this giant's grave, there was a young man, maybe 22, 23, in a sort of work shirt, like office work shirt, and he was spray painting the ground. So I went over to him. He had like sort of office shoes on, and I just thought, this is very odd. You're 1,200 foot up in the air. Why are you dressed like that? And what the heck are you doing? So I said, oh, hello, what are you doing? And he said, oh, I'm here from a mobile phone company. This is where we're going to put a mobile phone mast. And I said, oh, and I said, why have you chosen this? And he said, literally quoting that transaction from 1864, we've assessed this to be the best place where you can see it from all around, and the coverage then from this mobile phone mast will be absolutely best from here. So this is where we're going to put it. And it was like in the middle of this sacred site, potentially sacred site, but significant anyway. And I have to just say at this point, there is no evidence at all. They've not done any archaeological excavation up there at all. So just have to say, that it's still untouched archaeologically. So there was no archaeological evidence of this at all, other than this transaction. It's mentioned on the map, and local culture. And I said, well, that's really interesting, because actually this place has got a name. This is its name. It's known as the Giant's Grave, and it's also, got evidence to suggest that it's part of a burial complex that's related to Cardarnath Pike that you can see over there. And he said, I don't know anything about that. We just want to put it here because it's the best place. And I said, then exactly, that's why they've put a dead person here, because they wanted everybody to see that this was the very important location for this, how meaningful that is for the dead. And I said, look, you can't put anything up here. An assessment needs to be done. And I can talk to the county archaeologist. I know, I've been in touch with him before because of my work. And somebody needs to do an assessment pretty fast before you make any decisions. And he said, okay. And so I sort of obviously showed him that I was really meaning that this shouldn't be going ahead. So he tossed it off down the hill, and I went back and sat on the wall. And I just was like, Jesus, like everything converged, like knowing my skill set, knowing that I would be able to talk in a way that could convince this young man, knowing that I could contact the county archaeologist and at least delay the situation so that there could be a proper assessment and see what happened. But also from a spiritual point of view and a sort of esoteric point of view, that I'd also done the work so that I could lie in the bath and hear the voice of the goddess and trust it. It was one of those really spine-tingling moments, and I just needed to sit on the wall and sort of go, wow, okay, wow, I've been used, like really used, but not in a kind of misuse and a sort of exploited way, but in a like show me where my work is, please, and then I just sort of went down the hill. I think this took 2012, so I might not have had a smartphone. Maybe I did, I can't remember, but anyway, I had to go home and write the emails and things. And I think there was just that energy, that shaking of like, I am doing the work that has been asked of me. And it was like at that point, it was just like, this is Bridget. I called her Bridget, the voice, because it was clearly female. But I don't know, and I won't ascribe because I think that there's no need to anthropomorphize. It was the land, it was the ancestors, it was the ecology, it was everything merging together to ask me to protect something really, really important. So fast forward, after sort of talks to the county archaeologist, to that mobile phone company, what the mobile phone mast has gone up. It is in the place it had, but the positives are that it was moved slightly so that it wasn't at the absolute nexus of the very best place. It was like 2 or 3 meters away, which in terms archaeologically can make a vast difference. And also they had decided that instead of doing an archaeological survey, because it's up in the High Pennines, there's no expectation of it ever being disturbed through ploughing, through development or anything like that, that rather than earmarking for archaeological investigation, which I would personally really like to see one day, if we can get some money together and get a project together and see, they changed the foundation of the mast itself so that it would be a sort of temporary bolting down rather than this huge kind of concrete slab, which I think is how they usually do it. So it was a sense of achievement and understanding all of the players, that mobile phone masts are all cropping up, that the requirements of the forces of development were one thing, and I knew personally also from my personal situation that I could not put myself on the line like that in this time. As time has gone on, things have changed, but at that point in time, with a very young family and all the difficulties, it's you have to make a decision, don't you, to know what kind of pressure and what kind of screw you can turn. So yeah, it's kind of interesting because it does feel like every time I see that mast up there, I think, okay, what's going on? Could there have been more? If I'd been on if I hadn't been on my own, perhaps, and this is what I'm taking from John's story, which is sometimes humans do need to trust one another, and so to actually network and to keep being diligent. So I've definitely learnt that. but also, yeah, to just trust the voice of the land. Yeah, so it was a very powerful experience, and it taught me a great deal. It taught me a lot about, understanding how it feels still to have a relationship with what I would call a wounded landscape. And I think that that's really something that I've now moved into, where there are a lot of wounded landscapes, and I focus quite a lot on heritage, wounded heritage, because, and I think that the mast up at Hespeck Raise has really helped me understand this, which is, although development has occurred, the voice of the goddess is still there. It's like underneath it, even if you've got loads of tarmac over it or concrete, there's still a relationship still to be had, because it is our earth. It's maybe wounded and it may be vulnerable, but equally it is there, and it deserves to not be orphaned, not like, oh, well, that's it, it's happened, I wash my hands of it. It's to say, no, there needs to still be a relationship to this difficult landscape, which leads me to my final thing that I'd like to say, which is one of the things that has encouraged me to sort of understand activism and sacred activism to more of an understanding of what it really means after the voice speaks, is a charity called Radical Joy for Hard Times. So I'm just going to share my screen and give a final example of this, which maybe I hope you can see. So I've been on the board of a charity called Radical Joy for Hard Times. It's a USA-based charity, but we're considering opening up something for UK and Europe, which focuses specifically on retaining and connecting people to wounded landscapes. So we go directly into the relationship of what it's like to live in a wounded landscape. So they can be communities under threat from something like fracking, from something like open cast coal mines or polluted rivers, but it can also be historic woundedness that is still affecting communities. And that the joy is about remembering that the land is still speaking and it's still connecting us in a way that helps us and wants us to be part of that ecology of space. So this is a photograph of one of the stones in another late Neolithic, early Bronze Age complex called Broomrig, which is, you can see it from the fell that I was sitting on. And this is a large stone circle around about the same size as Castlerig Stone Circle, if anybody knows that in Cumbria. But it's also got these satellite stone circles. They're called circle cairns, so they would have had a burial in the middle as well. And there's also a stone alignment, but the actual stones are very significantly damaged. And if you look at the categorization on the Historic England site, it's called a damaged and at-risk site. There's no plans at all to protect it. It actually has been a plantation, a pine plantation, and now a Christmas tree plantation since around about 1820. So the entire land gets grown, larch trees for 80 years, and then they all get chopped, and then it starts again and chopped and starts again. So the stones themselves are in terrible array. But I go there and I lead these earth exchanges there, where we just basically bear witness to the challenges of the landscape. And what the reasoning why we do that is to remind people that although we are now surrounded by many examples of challenging landscapes and challenged landscapes, such as an asbestos factory or a mine, or the Stonehenge tunnel, these sort of things that just keep coming at us. But yet we should be in relationship to it, because these places don't want to be orphaned just because they're challenging or difficult. They need to belong to the family of the earth. And so bearing witness to them, giving them attention, going, yes, I see you. I see you're wounded. You're not gorgeous like Long Meg. Everybody goes to Long Meg and everybody wants to take a photo with Long Meg and, and the Ring of Brodgar or whatever. But these places are these wounded, but still ringingly sacred sites. So my role is to sort of go around basically and bearing witness and bringing the joy of those connections. So if anybody wants to look for Radical Joy for Hard Times, the website is radicaljoy.org. But yes, it's about, for me, I'm learning about community, about learning how these sites are actually really significant sacred heritage sites. Because I think I was quiet, I thought I was the only one who really sort of cared, because there's so many more things, ecology, environmental destruction, the warming of the seas, huge infrastructure risks. So I was kind of secretly, quietly going, oh, it's just me who worries about these sites. But I'm beginning to really trust that there's more than just me. And so Broomrig, again, so Hespeck Rays and Broomrig, they're both teaching me to bring voices together, to be in community and to listen to the land that's speaking, even under the destruction. Like if you're, I've got ill family members at the moment, just because they're ill, I don't turn my back on them. I love them. I cherish them. I want them to be part of the world that I am enmeshed in. And that's how I see sacred earth activism for me. It's about going, yeah, you're really struggling. You're really wounded, and you are part of this earth. And I see you, and I cherish that. So I'm going to stop there. I think that I've probably said enough, and almost bang on time. That's good. So please do ask any questions if you've got any.
Harriet, thank you. That was fascinating. In the chat, there have been comments of people really loving your talk, and there's also some interesting, there was a question and it'd be kind of, people started responding to each other, and I thought I would just reflect it to you to hear how you would see this. It was just after you talked about getting out of the, you were in the bath and you heard this voice, and then someone said, thank you for trusting your inner voice because of what unfolded. And then someone responded to that and said, no, it wasn't the inner voice. You were just hearing the voice of the land. And this discussion has started about like what was going on there. And I don't know if there's anything you want to say about that, because I think it's a very interesting thing, especially when, you're an archaeologist, not necessarily a priest. Yes.
Yeah, well, I love that. I love that question. And it comes up, actually, I'm going to answer it actually as an ecotherapy teacher, because it comes up a lot. And I think Max is an eco-psychologist, so I wonder if he might have a thought. Because in the Western concepts, we assume that if something's in our head, then it's not natural, because we aren't really natural. In the West, there's this duality, humans over here, nature over here. And so we do question, oh, am I making up? Is it in my head? Therefore, it's somehow diminished from its connectiveness to the natural world. And so when the sort of dichotomy, that kind of, oh yeah, humans and nature aren't really the same, when that really dissolves, and we realize that whatever is communicating with us is communicating into the synapses and neurons and all the things that are making my brain work the way they are, then it'll sound like it's coming in my head. But like the Sheldrake idea, of morphic resonance, it's coming in. And I think, so it's both, and it's a voice in my head, because whatever is out there has gone, woo, let's make it, because, rather than, knowing that I speak English, and that, so it's kind of like the Babel fish. It's the esoteric Babel fish. It's gone in and it's gone, right, what do I need to have you know, to make the sounds that will make sense to this particular individual's human body. So yes, I, of course, with all things like questioning the voices that you hear, you know, there is obviously the sort of more mental health and neurological approach to kind of being, you know, or at least aware of that and knowing what happens when you are hearing voices and things. But equally, there can be a very strong clarity where it's yeah, it's the nature has dissolved something, and is communicating directly. So I would say I heard the voice of something, but it was definitely happening in my head.
Thank you. What a great answer. Well, I don't know how the others feel, but I thought that was really inspiring. Thank you. Then someone asked, Jewel asked, have you linked findings into the magic of these parts? For example, 9 Ladies, Arbelo, Kinder Scout, Thorpe Cloud Neolithic remains.
Can you repeat that? Have I linked
Have you linked findings of magic into these parts?
Yeah.
I'm
Do you know,
gonna go
I'm not sure I can really answer that. My knowledge, my focus of knowledge, is Cumbria. Although I do know lots of people who are in groves. You know, I'm a druid with Obod, so I know that there's people who go to these places and actively you know, connect magically, ritually. I'm not sure actually if there's a database of any sort of way that anybody's ever done anything really kind of a really gritty research into these kinds of stories of experiences. I would be really fascinated. My PhD is actually looking at senses of connection that have happened at all sorts of sites. So it is very close. It's actually very, very close, but it's much more open about when somebody goes to a site and something happens that can feel well-being or makes them feel better in some way. So there's sort of quite a sense of like, what am I getting out of this? But equally, there may well be some stories that come up that tell me about actually how they've really heard the voice of those places. Yeah, it's I think because I've been reluctant to talk about it, there's a shyness, and I think that partly, just going back to my training as an archaeologist, when I was growing up, I mean, I really did just connect to everything, you know, and there was no judgment about that. And then in archaeology training, I think a lot of people have something similar, but they dumb it down because, you know, it's deemed to be unprofessional, or, you know, you've got to support sort of the rational mind and, you know, working out sequences and all that sort of thing. And so I've probably been trained to not think that there's this deep connection, and I think that I've had to go through a really strong important unpicking of that, to trust that. And there are examples of people who have very, very strong experiences. So I'm thinking of Jill Smith. If anybody knows Jill Smith's work, she wrote a beautiful book called The Gypsy Switch, where she literally went around in a homemade cart all around the zodiac routes of the British Isles, and had very powerful experiences at certain sites in the landscape. So there are definitely examples of that, especially in our literature. But yeah, it could be definitely something if somebody's interested in seeing whether there's more of that around. That would be really interesting. Yeah, Karen. Yeah, The Gypsy Switch is by Jill Smith with a J. I hope that answers your question.
Well, I think it also addresses someone else's question. I'm going to just tell you, and if there's anything you want to add, you can. Otherwise, I'll go to the next one. It's from Zach. He said, I wonder how you might speak for a bit about how you combine both your academic side and your more attuned heart space, earthbound side. Do you see them working together, or do you make a separation between them? And in a way, I think you've kind of said how, you've kind of been challenged, but do you want to add anything to that?
I think it's ongoing, and it's about reading the room. I mean, anyone who knows me, and I know there's a couple of people who are good friends, and so then I don't hold back in certain spaces that I feel comfortable. Now, I'm getting menopausal, and I'm just beginning to just go, right, sod it. This is my truth. You can bloody well take it. But equally, when I am in academic circles, there's a sort of subtlety to it. I think positively that the whole sector, the heritage sector, is beginning to sort of really understand the deep importance of spiritual heritage connection and ancestral connection. I think it's now becoming unavoidable. And I know that I have a very important role in sort of straddling the two. Sorry, Bob, I'm just seeing them pop up and I'm like, it is really important to sort of know that I can just gently guide and say, look, I haven't exploded. I'm still a reliable archaeologist, but I can also sort of hold my space, and just sort of be able to hold to be like that, and also just deep compassion, because people come along this line in their own time, in their own way. I think that it's become clearer and clearer that sort of merging of ancestral connection, of deep reverence, of esoteric connection through ancestral and heritage responsibility is where I've firmly placed myself now. So it's work in progress, and it's about reading the room, I would say, for me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Back to you, Marie-Louise.
Yeah, well, thank you, Harry, for this very intense story and the insights you get. And also, thank you, Karen, for looking after the questions. Thank you all for your questions.